Hey, this is Shaun with the Go Tennis Podcast, powered by Signature Tennis. Check out our calendar of Metro Atlanta tennis events at letsgotennis.com. And if you're a fan of Bull Shark Sports, go to shop.letsgotennis.com and get yourself a hoodie or a hat. Today, this is Youth Sports Talk with Coach Ben Hestley. Today, Ben wants to talk about watching sporting events. Ben, you ready to talk youth sports?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's dive in.
All right, today, Coach Ben wants to talk about how we can encourage good habits regarding watching sports and maybe pick on some of the bad habits just for fun examples. So, Ben, where do you want to start?
I'll start with a story, like I like to start with. And we always talk about telling our kids that we coach, go watch sports, whatever the sport of choice is, or whatever sport we're coaching them in. Go watch the professionals play. Go watch a college game or a college match of that sport and help you learn something. But I guess are we really specific about what are they supposed to be watching? So I'll give you an example. When I was in college, I had a sociology professor, and we were learning the differences between macro sociology and micro sociology. And everybody, I hope, understands just basically, macro is the whole global or group organizational approach, and micro is more specific or individual. So she used the analogy of learning to watch football. Her husband's a huge football fan. Her kids were then getting into football and wanting to watch football as fans, and they were going to spend time as a family watching football games. Well, she never really taken interest to football until now, and so she was going to learn how to watch, and she was way behind because they've all watched football forever and have a great understanding of it. So most of us who love football, myself included, we take a more macro approach, right? We kind of just watch the game as a whole. We can kind of zoom out, if you will, and see all 22 players on the field and kind of have an idea of what they're all doing. And we're just watching the game as a whole. And we might watch what I call in chunks. I kind of watch the center quarterback for a minute. Then I can zoom over to the linebacker, see how he's rushing the quarterback. Then I can zoom over to the receiver and see what his route is and the coverage of the defensive back. So that's kind of chunks. But I'm all kind of watching that all at the same time. Well, she couldn't do that because she'd never been around it before. So she took a very micro approach. She was literally following the ball step by step, or she would watch each individual player on each play. So play by play, she's watching each individual player or specifically how the ball moved throughout that particular play. And I just found that really interesting that, wow, I've been watching sports forever. I just kind of just watch it, and just organically take on what's happening. Whereas she was having to be very specific and particular about what she was paying attention to.
So, you don't remember your first football game watching experience because my guess is you couldn't see momentum and you couldn't see
Yeah, I
the
was
whole picture.
probably well, I'm from Alabama, and the joke from us Alabamians is we come out of the womb with a football in our
You're
hands.
born capable, sure.
So we pretty much know how to play football from infancy. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. That's a great genetic trait.
Yeah.
Congratulations. But I would absolutely tell somebody to watch a football game exactly like that in the first time. See if you can keep track of the ball. That's all I want you to do. And I think that's great advice to figure it out because they don't even know what a defensive back is versus a linebacker versus a running back. They're not going to know any of that and they're not going to understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's kind of similar, I guess, to the way I advise my baseball players to watch an individual position.
Yeah.
Now you can't often do this on TV because they show the action, right? They show
Jump
where the
around.
ball is. They're just going to show the pitcher batter relationship with the catcher. Then wherever the ball's hit, they're going to just zoom to that place, and so
Right.
you are in a sense following the ball. But if you go to a game and you're there in person, I always advise my players like pick a position, pick your position if you want, or a position you're interested in, and just watch that player for several innings.
Yeah.
If you're interested in base running, when base runners are on, pay attention to the base runner. Don't worry so much about the batter pitcher. Just worry about the base runner. So I think to that regard, and baseball may lend itself more to do that than football or say soccer in your case. But that's a great way to do it for sure.
Yeah, and there's the difference between watching on television and watching in person. And you and I had a previous conversation where we both like to sit, as an example, probably in baseball, you'd want to sit on one of the sidelines behind a dugout. Like that would be a prime spot to kind of see at an angle, but you'd be able to watch one player say, I'm going to watch that second baseman, and that's the only guy I'm going to pay attention to. Now, in baseball, you're probably going to fall asleep if you do that. But in other
If you're
sports,
really interested, it's an interest
well,
level.
yeah, you're learning, you're there, maybe you're taking notes, you're doing research. But
Yeah.
from a tennis perspective, instead of going back and forth and back and forth like we picture tennis fans doing, to be able to sit behind one of the players and be able to see more like the television view. What's interesting is if you watch on television, only one of the players in a tennis match is actually a unique way to do it because you're used to, we as knowing what we're doing are used to watching the whole thing and watching what happens as it happens. But in person, you can just watch one player, and that can be really intriguing because you can see footwork, you can see movement, you can see anticipation, preparation. You can do the same thing in a football game again, really only if you're in person. And in soccer, you said you were going to kick it to me on that one. Soccer, you can do that. I was a striker. I'm the guy that liked to kick the ball in the goal. So I'm watching that guy. I'm watching Joseph Martinez. I'm watching a Messi type, and he's the guy. Like, okay, there he is. There he is. Whether he's got the ball or not. But if I'm going to tell somebody to go watch soccer, I'm going to tell them to follow the ball in the beginning.
If they've never done it before.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, the same with basketball. It's going to be very boring for them to watch one player. Like watch the forward post up here,
Right. What's a
or
forward?
watch the center move into position to guard the goal and then block the shot potentially.
Right.
That's not very interesting. Yeah, you're going to have to follow the ball is probably the best way to go and just watch watch where the ball goes and try to get an understanding of how the game is supposed to be played.
Yeah, so I agree with your sociology professor there, and I appreciate the fact that you explained what micro and macro were, but you didn't bother to explain sociology because that's not easy to do. But in this
Yeah.
case, I do this all the time. I say all the time, that's a strange phrase. I do this often with beginner tennis players, and I say, go home and watch tennis. And I tell the parents, I don't usually send them home for screen time. But in this case, I just want them to try to keep score. That's all I'm looking for. See if you can keep track of the score because watching a football game and saying, oh, they got 3 points. Oh, this time they only got one. Okay, well, now they got six. Okay, what's going on? But at least the score is a basic number that makes sense. 7-3. You have an idea who's winning. Soccer is even easier. Baseball is pretty easy too. But in tennis, you've got that little box down there with numbers that seem fairly random. And I'm like, why is that guy? Well, that guy's winning. He's winning 6,340 15 to 3,209. Wait, what? What am I looking at here?
Yeah, and then if you're watching on TV and they're throwing stats at you, like Djokovic has made 82% of his first serves, and of those 82% of his first serves, he's won 78% of those. And the second serves, he makes 95% of his second serves, but of 95% of his second serves, he only wins 45% of those points. And you're like, what the heck?
What's a second serve?
What is the second? Well, and let's talk about that for a second, because I'm reminded of a kid that I think I've shared on a prior show way back when, and because this kid's in high school now, but when he was a junior, when he was a young kid, he was 10, 11 years old, he was learning to play tennis for the first time, never been around the sport at all, and he could rally really well. He actually, like, if you just took him out, went baseline to baseline, just he would be a perfect hitting partner, could just rally all day, but he could never play a match because honestly it mentally overwhelmed this kid.
Hmm.
And we're talking the kid who came from soccer. Not to knock soccer out. I know you're a huge soccer.
Yep,
You're
there's a
a
simplicity to it.
former high level soccer player. But right, one of the reasons kids get into soccer and why it's an easy intro to youth sport is because it's relatively easy to introduce to them, right? I don't want to say easy to be good at, but easy to play, right? You kick the ball around, there's a goal, you get 1 point. If you kick it in the goal, there's not multiple scoring opportunities for different things
Right.
like football or basketball. In tennis the same way, right? I mean, there's a point score on every point, but it's 15, 30, 40. But I'm getting to the point of the court itself. So he was super confused because, and tennis always made sense to me, but taken from his point of view, it makes total sense that it's very confusing. You have to serve on a certain side, then you have to serve into this little box. But then once the serve goes into the little box, you can hit it into this big space. And it sounds funny, but it seriously overwhelmed him. He was like, I don't understand this. This is stupid. Why can't we just drop the ball and hit back and forth? Like another sport. Basketball, it's not like I got to inbound. Now, so there's some certain inbound rules. We know sometimes you can move, sometimes you have to stand still. But for the most part, you throw the ball in the court, the whole court's the whole court the whole time, and off you go, right? Baseball and pitching has the strike zone. It's either ball or strike, but generally it's like you can hit the ball into this area here. It's not like saying like, well, your first batter has to hit the ball in the infield, but your second batter can hit the ball anywhere. Like that's kind of how tennis is. Your first shot has to go here, and after that you can go anywhere. And for those of us who play it a lot, we just kind of just gloss over. It's just that's the way it is. But for a new player, you're like, they could be like, this makes no sense at all.
Yeah, and we as coach types know to have this conversation because we've had that first timer come in and go and look at the court. What am I looking at? What did one of the kids say? And I had a class once, and he said, "What are these long, skinny squares on the sides?" I'm like, "Oh, the
Yeah,
long, skinny
yeah.
squares." Okay, yeah, those
Those are the
are
alleys.
yeah.
Yeah,
We don't even use those right now. And he's looking at me like, "Well, then why are they here?" Like, all right,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
I don't even want to have to stop and discuss doubles because it's a tangent. It's not
Well,
irrelevant.
I had one recently with a C-level alto player, and she's been playing tennis for probably, I don't know, maybe 2 years at this point. That's 4 or 5 seasons of alta tennis, and she's
Mhm.
a mid to low C-level player, and she wants some lessons. I gave her some lessons, and she specifically wanted to work on return to serve. So I just have a hard time with like returning someone's serve. So I set her up, and I noticed immediately she goes to the baseline, stands on the baseline, and I said to her, I will like what you may want to do because at your level they're not serving that hard.
Mhm.
Like move in a little bit. And she's like, I can do that. I'm like, yeah, you can do that. And she's like, well, I thought I had to stand behind the baseline. I'm like, no, that's if you're serving. If you're serving, you stand behind the baseline. But if you're returning the serve, you can stand really wherever you want. You just have to let the ball bounce. You can't hit it out of the air, obviously. And I should say obviously, it wasn't obvious to her.
No.
And so you have to let the ball bounce, and then the ball has to bounce again here in this little square, cross court, diagonal, and then you hit it anywhere you want, but you can stand anywhere you want to return the serve. And I was like, she was like, "Oh, that's amazing! I'm like so much better instantly because here I am." So because sometimes the ball almost bounces twice before it gets to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, because you don't have to stand behind the baseline. So like in our programs, we often have a thing called a tennis rule and a Coach Ben rule, and I tell kids like standing behind the baseline to serve. That's not a Coach Ben rule. That's a tennis rule. You have to do it. Serving cross court. That's not a Coach Ben rule. That's a tennis rule. You have to do that when you actually play a match. Now in practices, we will modify things or whatever based on the needs of the kids, but yeah, I mean, knowing those rules of the game are important. So probably to your point and back to my professor's point of watching the ball, watch how the play or point, whatever sport it is, watch how it starts.
Hmm.
How does it start? And then how does the ball progress through that play? And then where's the end goal? Where are we trying to get that ball to end up? That might be the best approach for a newbie person to watch something and get the most out of watching something.
Well, and send them home with a goal in mind. So usually when I'm sending a beginner child home to watch some tennis, it's one thing, and it's scoring. It is a thing that they will start to figure out naturally. They will see it, it will happen, they'll watch the scoring change, and they'll start to be able to pay attention. I've told the story of the 8-year-old girl who's like, "Oh, we're going to do 15, 30, 40." I'm like, "How did you know that?" And her father just has Tennis Channel on at home often.
Yeah.
So the kids just assumed the information. Now, there are some rules that are different from professional to children. So we've got scoring, we've got format, we've got size of field, size of court, we've got all kinds of differences that are there. But the general idea is go be a fan of the sport that you're playing so you understand that that allows the child to see a more macro concept of the little game they're playing with their friends.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before about being part of the system as a whole and not just focus on your individual experience, if you will, with that sport.
Yeah,
Right.
and
Even
that can
even if
add
you're
some
even
love.
at the game, even at the games, like some of the most fun I had at tennis tournaments. I know we were avid and accomplished. I was accomplished. We were good players at the time. Was go watching your friends play. Go watch another match. Right. Don't go back to the hotel and shower off and get cooled off and get hydrated and get your food in you. And there's all that part to it too. But go watch another match. Go watch somebody you're potentially going to play next. Or if you're at a baseball park and you play your baseball game, go sit and watch another game. You know, um,
Scouting, and you don't even have to call it scouting, but that's a great concept because now you're thinking strategically about the game that you're playing if you're in a match play setting.
yeah. I mean, I'm not advocating that a 7-year-old rec ball coach go scout the team that they're going to possibly play, but
Well, if the
go
coach
watch it as
wants
a
to do it, bring the kids and say, "Hey, let's go
bring
watch
the
somebody
kids.
else's
Yeah,
baseball game.
yeah.
This is what you look like." And they're all like, "Oh my gosh, these kids can't catch." I'm like, neither can you. That's okay. That's why we're here.
Well, and then you find those when you're watching those games with your kids, you can find those teachable moments,
Yeah.
right? Like, hey, like watch the, hey, watch this. I can remember vividly we were at the Atlanta Open years ago because my son was little. He was probably 4 or 5 and we're watching an Isner match, and we all know what's going to happen with Isner. He's going to play forever.
Yep.
And so you can't leave your seat until the game until there's a changeover, right? So he's in a tiebreaker, and I mean, dude, my kid had to go to the bathroom as a story. So he had to go to the bathroom. Well, we can't leave until like the tiebreaker's over. Like they will not let us out of the stadium until this breaker's over. You don't have a changeover because you're just kind of changing real quick and they start again. So they had the gates locked, attendants were there, nobody's getting out till this breaker's over. And this breaker must have gone like 18 to 20 or something. So like I remember him like intensely watching this match, but probably because he had to pee and he's watching it. And then as soon as Isner won the tiebreaker, literally like 18-20, I grab him and we run. I remember grabbing him like this and just running out of the stadium because he had to pee so bad. Um, but you learn rules like that. You learn things like that like you can't. And so there's an etiquette part to it as
Yeah.
well. What's the etiquette behind whatever sport that is that you're playing? I'll still do that at base. From my tennis experience, I still do that. I had somebody stop me at the other day. I was walking. I was at a high school game, baseball game. I was walking behind the backstop. I want to get to the other side. I parked on this side on the first base side. I want to get to the third base side because that's where our team was and watching. So I'm walking around, and as the pitcher goes to pitch, I just stop.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody asked me like, "Why don't you do that?" Like I was like, "Well, I'm just from growing up around tennis. I'm just used to like when the action's happening. Like I don't know if that pitcher's not even paying attention to me. Hopefully, but I
Yes,
I
that
just want to
is
be respectful and stop my
yes,
movement, so I'm not
yes.
just casually walking behind the backstop as he's trying to deliver the pitch. I just stopped, waited, pitches delivered, no action happened, nobody hit it. I just kept walking. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think about it. I just kind of do it as a sign of respect to the people that are playing.
Because tennis teaches you respect,
Yeah.
unlike some other sports,
Who will remain nameless.
which will remain nameless, having nothing to do with your most recent example. So, all right, Ben, what's the final call to action here? The
Yeah,
parent.
I think to sum it up, if you are, we want you to watch games. We want parents to watch games with their kids. When you're watching those games, sometimes we can mindlessly it just be background noise basically as we're drinking a beer and hanging out and socializing, or we can be super intense on the outcome of it if we are a big fan of that team rather than so we're uber focused on the competition and the winning part of it if we're really a fan of that team, but try to find some teachable moments in there, some things that might have happened, you know whatever it may be, and then again, if you're interested specifically in something, focus on that. Have a particular focal point, whether it's an individual player in a team sport, whether it's seeing how this play is choreographed or this play is organized or whatever, um, whether it's watching the ball, how's the ball move through, what are some particular rules about the game that I wasn't sure about or didn't know beforehand, those sorts of things. So have a particular focus, I guess, would be the final point when you're watching these sports games.
Good habit to add. I like it. Ben, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. This has been Youth Sports Talk with Coach Ben Hesley. We will see you next week. Thank you.
All right, enjoy watching sports, everybody.